I'm Kenton, and I've been reading a lot of opinions on whether or not we're in a real estate bubble and there's going to be a crash. I thought I'd share my opinion as well. We all know that market anomalies or inconsistencies can and do persist much longer than most of us believe they should. Even after a market corrects, it isn't easy to always explain how we arrived at hyperinflated pricing or what triggered the collapse, but keeping all this in mind, I will share my opinion of where we are at and potentially what may happen in the near future. I'll start by saying I believe in the general concept of efficient markets, but realize we can go through prolonged periods where it seems like the markets aren't pricing assets correctly. When that happens, I do not believe everything has changed this time and it's much different, and I just believe it simply means the market is reacting to a new situation, and over time it will correct as it always has in the past. My experiences in real estate, and in this video I will be speaking specifically about residential real estate, predominantly single-family homes, condos, and smaller 1 to 4 unit apartment buildings. To start, I want to touch on a few of the popular theories I've heard and then explain what my opinions are on these. The market conditions I'm going to be discussing are why there is a limited inventory or supply in some locations, which is driving prices up in those areas due to the increasing demand for this limited supply. This is basic economics and the basis for this discussion. I also acknowledge that there are several downtown areas in major cities where there is an oversupply of condos that are currently lowering their prices to sell. But real estate is local, and those condo owners are experiencing a completely different market than the home buyers in the suburbs who keep having to bid and get outbid, and they're in bidding wars to buy a home. I'll start with the AirBNB theory that residential real estate inventory has been reduced due to increasing demand for Airbnb short-term rentals. It makes a little sense on the surface, but the problem with this theory is where are the majority of the Airbnbs existing and where do they thrive? The vast majority of Airbnbs are located in densely populated destinations where there are usually hotels in close proximity. There's not a huge demand for Airbnbs in the suburbs or in rural areas, so this theory would really only explain a small increase in demand in major metros where there seems to be currently high vacancy and there's not a higher demand that the Airbnb might have created by converting housing to short-term rentals. Although the popularity of Airbnbs may have grown over the years, this is not an overnight change where a huge amount of inventory switched over to Airbnbs recently. So for both of these reasons, I do not believe Airbnb has had any real significant or recent impact on the current situation. Next, there's talk about an exodus from the cities to the suburbs. This seems to be another popular theme that there are a lot of people leaving the cities and moving to lower cost areas with more space since their jobs can now be remote. In my opinion, this is really just anecdotal. I've included a link to an article with data that shows and supports this theory as being weak at best. The 18-year cycle. The 18-year cycle may not be very popular, but I do believe in it. And I think most people do believe in the 4 phases of real estate, which are recovery, expansion, hypersupply, and recession. I've included a link to the article describing the 18-year cycle below, which is where I found the graphic. As I said before, I do believe in the 18-year cycle. After all, the data did predict the 2008 crash after the last crash happened in 1990, with data going back over 200 years. Seriously, check out the article. It's a short read, but it's incredibly interesting. I also realized that the cycle can be shortened or drawn out due to other factors. This cycle currently predicts the next peak in land pricing to be 2024, so the downturn would hypothetically follow shortly after. I guess we'll have to wait and see. I don't believe we are currently in the tail end of the cycle, which would indicate we are currently experiencing hypersupply just before a bubble pops. In my opinion, we are more likely in phase 2, which is expansion. Could current rising prices in some areas lead to developers starting larger developments that would lead to a hypersupply? That's a possibility, but I don't see it happening yet, and it would take years for that to show up. The current housing shortage. This is true in many areas, not just the areas currently experiencing a significant uptick in pricing. Experts have clearly shown that we are currently in the midst of a nationwide housing shortage. See the Freddie Mac article below with data supporting it. I am in agreement that we are definitely experiencing a housing shortage in many areas of the country, which also explains why some cities have been contemplating or passing laws to allow accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, to increase the density and create additional housing quickly. The hope is this change in zoning will help to make up for the lack of development in these areas, which was ironically created by strict zoning laws and burdensome permitting processes in these same areas, among other reasons. So, what exactly are we experiencing, and is it a bubble? Prices have been going up in the suburbs of major cities, but we also see prices dropping for the condos in the cities. So I wouldn't say it is a completely bubble territory, even though it might feel like it if you are being outbid to buy the house in the suburbs that you want. The obvious reason for this is the limited supply of housing in areas that people are trying to buy a new house in. In my opinion, this is a temporary situation. Many buyers were considering moving in, say, a year or two, but moved up their timeline due to the need for more space, both indoor and outdoor. The complicating factor is that this normally occurs in step with other people upgrading their home to something bigger and/or retirees downsizing to another location. COVID has effectively caused anyone who has sufficient space to keep it, and anyone who needs more space to want it sooner. This leads to pulling buyers from the future to today and keeping the majority of sellers from selling until COVID is under control. And to add to it, anyone who is struggling to pay their mortgage doesn't need to sell yet because they can't be foreclosed on. In my opinion, there will come a time in the very not too distant future where the banks will start to foreclose and everyone who put off moving will start to sell, and we will be in the reverse situation with more sellers than buyers, which will bring prices back down. I don't think we will see a bubble pop, but we will see a short-term reduction in prices in some areas where we will have a lot of sellers and a potentially struggling economy. There will be a significant short-term increase in foreclosure activity, but nothing like we had 10 years ago. I don't think this will last long though, as we still don't have enough housing to meet the demand of a fully employed economy. In short, I don't believe we're in a bubble, but I do believe that short-term supply constraints are raising prices in some areas. At some point in the near future, there will be downward pressure on pricing in these same areas, where there is a significant increase in supply along with fewer buyers. It will, in my opinion, be short-lived, and we will return to a slow uptrend in price appreciation after a correction in pricing. Of course, this all assumes the economy stays the same or improves. If the economy gets significantly worse and unemployment goes up, then that will change everything. After all, the housing market is dependent on employment. Without a job, people can't afford to buy or stay in their homes. I hope you have enjoyed hearing my perspective on the current housing market, and I realize everything may change the day after I post this. So if you liked the video, please consider subscribing, and if you have any thoughts on this or anything else, please leave them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching.